Doesn't seem to be jumping across to LinkedIn. See what happens. Seems like it should be working. So
Okay, good.
let's just check. Right. Morning, everyone. Welcome to our first LinkedIn Live. You're joining Leon Purton and Tim Boyd here to talk about when you were technically brilliant and then got promoted and struggled. Now, I want you to think for a moment. I want you to ask yourself something. When have you seen somebody who was perhaps the best technical person you ever worked with? And then think about what happened when they got promoted. If you're nodding along, stay with us. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Love to introduce to you my co-host, Tim Boyd. Tim, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me and excited for the conversation.
Great, Tim. Do you mind introducing yourself to the team and helping them understand what you appreciate about this topic?
Sure, no, absolutely. As Leon said, my name is Tim Boyd. I'm currently a program manager over at Northrop Grumman out here in California in the United States. Basically spent most of my career working on big space programs, and so leading large organizations of people and large portfolios of execution. And I think the big thing for me about this topic is every day I see people who I think are in the wrong role, mainly because they were extremely good or incredible at their previous role. And they've been told time and time again, in order for them to continue to grow, they need to take on the next level or take on a leadership role or this or that. And sadly, they just feel like that's the right next step for them, given, I will say, the false premise that they've been given. And so I think today we want to talk about there are multiple paths for everybody, and you don't have to move into a true leadership role if you want to stay in the technical path and stay in the management path versus technical as well. There's a path for everybody, and that's what the conversation will be about today.
Fantastic, Tim. Thank you. And I must admit that Tim and I got connected on LinkedIn when I noticed that there was another engineer working for Northrop Grumman standing on stage and talking to technical people about how they can better show up in the workforce and have a bigger impact. I myself did just over 20 years in the Royal Australian Air Force as an electronic engineer and now work in industry and corporate world. And I've seen time and time again the technical person get promoted and then struggle when they realize the things that made them excellent as a technical contributor are now holding them back as a first level leader. I'm excited to talk about this topic today. If you're in the chat, feel free to drop any questions you might have in there. We'll get to those later on, or if you'd like to join us, that'd be fantastic. All right, Tim, let's talk, maybe go back in time a little bit. What does it feel like from the inside? When were you that person who was technically brilliant and looking at your career options going forward? What does that look like for you?
Man, I think going back in time and you start thinking about all the things that you transition into a technical role or a leadership role, I think the thing that I'm reminded of when I took on my first true leadership role is I was scared. I was really, really scared. I was really, really nervous because I did feel that I had all the right technical stuff, but I wasn't technical enough, I felt, for that role. And I didn't appreciate at the time that there were many, many other things involved when it came to a leadership role. And I didn't have to use the same skill sets that I leveraged in that technical role in order to be successful in the new role. And I think that was the transition point for me where I failed to recognize. So I was really scared and really nervous, and I tried my best to gather as much information as I possibly could so people would respect me from a technical perspective. But once I got in, I realized that all the technical people were still doing their thing, and they didn't need me to tell them what they needed to do. And so they were off and running, and I just had to understand just enough to be able to communicate up the chain. And I started realizing that my skill sets, the ones that I actually was blessed with from the beginning, were very different than a technical SME. And I could translate all the technical jargon and all those details into a higher level of education and communication strategy. And that's where I really started recognizing, hey, there's something to this. But so many people don't see that until it's too late, or when they get stuck in the I will say the grind of, you know, focusing on putting all the hours in to get the job done, and they just still can't get it done because there's so much more on their plate these days. So I think if you're able to figure that all out, which it took me a long time too, but once I was able to kind of navigate that a bit, it really radically changed the way I looked at the leadership role.
Can you think of a specific moment where that was really reinforced to you, Tim, and you're forced to maybe make a mental transition?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was thinking about this not too long ago, and one of the stories I share in some of the corporate cohorts that I'm involved in and I teach. Um, there was a moment in time I was sitting in the office, and I just transitioned from a previous role where I was leading. I was an operations manager for the Western region. We were standing up a brand new sector in the organization. So when you're smushing two giant sectors together, you can imagine kind of the chaos that comes with that, and just the innovation that has to happen. And so I was the enabler in the background for that team. It was a bunch of entry level executives, and I was kind of the force behind the scenes, doing all the analytics, all the background details, and making sure that everyone looked good and everything was successful in the long run. And so once I transitioned into my first big program management role, I realized that about 4 months in, I was just all in. I was absorbing so many hours and trying to do everything all by myself. And I realized at that moment in time, I was stuck in the same mindset of the previous role where I was the enabler. And then once I realized though that since I was the leader and I had people to do all the technical work, I needed to rely on them more effectively to take on some of that burden. They were already doing it. I just wasn't letting it go. So I always liken it to the idea of flipping a switch. Flip the light switch on, flip it off, but I had to turn it on to make sure that I recognized that I had to completely radically transform the way I executed and the way I led in order for the team to be successful, basically getting out of their way so they could do the job that they're getting paid to do.
Okay. And for you, Tim, was there a mentor, a trusted advisor in your life that helped you make that transition, do you think? Can you describe what you might have picked up from the people around you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've been blessed to have a lot of good mentors in my career and in my life. And when I go back and think about the stories that I was offering to my mentors at the time, they just basically told me, look, you're doing way too much, right? Leadership isn't this hard. Leadership
Yeah.
is basically just getting out of the way and letting people do what they need to do. And of course, you have to remove blockers and you have to help them execute and make their job easier. But at the same time, when I described all the things I was doing, they basically said, just get out of the way. That's all you need to do is just get out of the way. And
Yeah.
when they ask for your help, they will ask for your help when they need it, right? And so forth. And that mentality, not to create a laissez-faire type of leadership mentality, but at the same time, there's plenty of things you could do that doesn't get in the way of the technical execution, the people in the weeds doing the work. So that's where I've learned from my mentors that that's where I need to stay, and I can get involved wherever I need to, and wherever I feel like I need to plug myself in. But day to day, I let the team handle their business, and then I, help wherever I need to.
Fantastic. Yeah. For me, Tim, I think that moment came when I was in the military. I was uh, fortunate enough to be technically competent at my role, which allowed me to distinguish myself from my peers. I ended up getting promoted to the rank of squadron leader, which
Nice.
is a major equivalent for those people who don't know how to translate Royal Australian Air Force ranks across. But it was really the first time that I'd really earned that promotion, and I was now going to be in a position of influence, leading leading an organization. And they sent me away to a promotion course in Canberra for 2 weeks. And we did a series of different topics during that 2-week course. But by the end of it, I got to the point where I feel like the only real leadership topic we covered was how to have a coaching conversation, which is an element, but not all. I think people need to be successful as a leader of people. But I was fortunate enough, there was an air traffic controller on the course with me, a guy called Stu, and he lent me a copy of a book he was reading and goes, I think I hear you talking about leadership and how you're a bit frustrated by this course. I think this book would really resonate with you. And he gave me that book on a Friday, and I read it Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and gave it back to him Sunday night. And I was immersed in this book because it seemed to simplify this concept of leadership into something that was a bit more tangible. I find leadership's this big esoteric cloud of stuff. When everything becomes leadership, nothing becomes leadership. And the book that was given to me was the book Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet, which is the story of a US Navy submarine commander who turns the worst performing ship into the best performing ship in the US Naval Fleet. And the way he does it is essentially around the language you use and the opportunity you create for others through the language you use. And I finished reading that book, and it was like a little spark had been set off in my brain, Tim. And I'm like, why does this make so much sense to me, but nobody really talks about it? And so I started writing a leadership blog. I published it every Tuesday just to my work group, thinking that if I could get this little spark nestling in my brain, then when maybe the stuff that I'm thinking and reading about from a leadership perspective, I can give it to my work teams, perhaps something will nestle in their brain as well. And I called them Leadership Sparks. They went out every Tuesday for 100 weeks. And I was fortunate enough in a full circle moment that when I turned all of those rambling leadership thoughts into a book, I reached out to David Marquet and asked if he'd write the foreword for my book, and he agreed. So
that's amazing.
A really big moment for me. But one of the things that stood out to me is that this question, that the things that got you to be in a position to be identified for a leadership position aren't the things that make you a great leader. And you've got to switch your mindset from being the person who's great at getting stuff done to the person who's great at helping other people get stuff done. And those skills are slightly different. I lived through that moment, and the part that crystallized it for me, Tim, was when I went away. I become a technical expert in a specific domain in the military, and I was working inside of a team, and the team would always come up to me and ask me questions about topics. How should we handle this moment, Leon? And I'd give them answers. And how should we handle this moment, Leon? And I'd give them answers. I'm stuck here. I'm not quite sure the right approach. And I'd help them navigate that. And I felt really good for it. Like I got all these endorphin hits every time people come up to me and said, can you give me some help with this? And I was able to give them that answer. And then I went away for 2 weeks. I had to travel overseas for work for 2 weeks. I was actually presenting at a conference in Rome, which was fantastic. But I come back from that work trip 2 weeks later, and I said, how'd everybody go? And I expected them to say, we got stuck because you weren't here to answer the questions. What I found out was they all said to me, it was a little bit slow at the start, but we worked it out by the end. And it was like this moment when I went, oh, I'm the one that's stopping them from being able to work this out themselves, because I keep giving them all the answers all the time. And that was the moment that it switched for me, Tim, where I'm like, my job now is to not tell people so much, is to ask them more. And I started to swing that dial from giving all the answers to helping people find the answers. And it really seemed to unlock the potential that was within the team.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've always felt that, as you go through and you start getting kind of a big head that, hey, everyone comes to me, I'm the boss, I need to give the answers and I need to help people. The best way to solve that problem is to go on vacation or go to a conference. And then when you come back, exactly your point is you realize that things will keep moving and people will get the job done. And whether it's to the level you need it to be or not, hey, it's probably good enough for what we're doing and for that rigor. So I've always believed that. And every time I'm starting to feel hey, I'm really important and I need to be here, I realize like it's time to take a vacation because
It's
I
time
need
to
to
get
get rid
out
of
of their
this.
way. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the models that we use to help this transition and help coach other people through that transition, Tim. But I'm interested in your opinion as to why it happens. So if you get into the mind of say a junior engineer or a technical brilliant person, maybe they're a vet or an architect or somebody, and they're brilliant at whatever
Yeah.
job that they do, and they get this opportunity to step into management. Why do you think it is that they struggle?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think you alluded to it a little bit in a couple different forums, and I'll touch on those. But I think the major thing for me is that technical solutions and technical work is effectively black and white, right? I mean, there's some nuances when it comes to which exact architecture or which exact solution or requirements we're going to use, all that stuff. The way it's implemented is all a little bit unique and different, but the end result is it works or it doesn't work. And from a leadership perspective, that is much more fuzzy. And I like to tell people that's the space that I love to live in, that big fuzzy space, because there's no playbook for what we do and how we do it. Every situation you're in is unique. Every person on the other end is unique. And so the
Yeah.
situation inherently is going to be different from time to time and time. And I think the first big thing I'll talk about is the majority of people, and I've seen this in our company and a bunch of other companies and other people as well, but whenever it's time for someone to get promoted into a leadership role, no one does a great job of providing them training or opportunity space for growth when it comes to taking on that new set of responsibilities, especially when it's moving from an IC, like an individual contributor, over to a leader or a manager type of function and role. Completely different. No one prepares you for it effectively. And even if you have an opportunity to transition over the course of say 4 or 5 months with kind of the person previously in a role and mentor and guide, it's still not exact. It's still not enough to kind of really hit the ground running and execute. So I think a lack of preparation is a really big deal. And I think you also alluded to the fact that you had this dopamine withdrawal basically when it came to
Yeah.
always helping people and helping them give specific tangible artifacts or answers that help them get to the next step as opposed to asking the open-ended questions. And so I think once you don't have that, no one's coming to me on my team to ask me the technical solutions because there's plenty of technical people to do that. And since I've kind of gotten out of the way, they're off and running doing their thing. They come to me, ask me about the leadership questions, the program management, the business, the cost, the schedule questions, all those, and I can help address those as well. But you do get somewhat of a dopamine withdrawal from not
Mm.
being able to help people in the way that you typically would from a tangible artifact and execution perspective. Now, the third piece I would say is that the style in which you execute in the leadership role is vastly different. You're always doing specific analytics, you're using models, things that you can actually tweak and tune and leverage to give you the exact answer. But in the role of the leadership function, where most people fail is that transition into more of an influence model, where you have to now influence people to get the job done. And influence is complicated. You and I both know that. And most of the people probably here listening know that as well. Influence is probably one of the most nebulous things out there because you can influence people in a variety of different ways, whether that's through formal position of authority. You can say, "Hey, I'm the boss. You got to do what I say." If you're a parent, you can say, "Hey, I'm the boss in the house. You got to do what I say." Right? Sometimes it works with the kids, right, Leon? Sometimes it doesn't work.
Sometimes it
Um,
does not.
yeah, for sure. If you're an engineer, you can influence people, say, through problem solving, right? You're actually doing trade studies and analysis or trying to do a fishbone diagram and trying to understand what the solution is. And you can influence people through those outward adjustments as well. There's through communication. I always said that communication is one of the hardest, easiest things for us as human beings to actually do, but it's one of the hardest things for us to actually do effectively because so many nuances when it comes to communication, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, in person, over the phone, virtual, all that makes it very complicated and complex. So the way people receive it versus you're giving it, your intentions, all that can be very, very challenging. And then the last piece I think is just collaboration, right? None of the projects that we work on are individual siloed projects. They're not supposed to be. Sometimes they end up being that way, just the nature of how it works. But
Yeah.
ideally they're not supposed to. And every time we transition something from requirements from system engineering over to software so they can start developing their code, or from hardware into system engineering for the transition, whatever it may be, there is a collaborative effort that's required, and that element of influence is extremely powerful when it comes to all of these major factors and threads. And as a leader, you have to leverage that more effectively than you do on the technical side. Technical, you can talk about the jargon, you can talk about this is what I need specifically to do my job, etc. True giver receiver handoffs. But in our world, it's all about, hey, your team is late doing this. How do I help you get my team what we need so we can go off and run? And that's more of a negotiation and a higher level discussion. So I think those aspects of, I will say, the nuances when it comes to why I think why people struggle in those roles, and some of the things that I think manifest that I see in those functions when people transition are some of the predominant features I think that arise.
I have found, Tim, that one of the things that gets attacked in that transition is your identity of being a technical expert. So you hinted at that, Tim. You were identified by being brilliant at that technical expert role, and it becomes, for me, a central part of who I am. Right, I'm an engineer. That's a big word written in this identity bundle diagram that I have. Right, and what I needed to do as I made that transition was start to diminish the importance of that to my identity and start to increase the importance of this one that was said leader instead. Right. And so if you imagine them occupying space inside of your identity statue, as you shrink engineer down in your identity, you need something else to grow to take that space. And now some people that I've seen that really struggle with this transition don't do that. They keep that thing that made them technically brilliant, whatever it was, that maybe they're the great problem solver or whatever it might be, is this core part of their identity. They don't compress it to make space for the identity of leadership. And that moment is, I think, because they are attached to the work that they've put in, the effort they've done to become brilliant at that thing, that it's still an important part of them. So I 100% agree with you on that, Tim. I think it's a really important element of this transition. I think the second part, Tim, is that hero mentality. And I mentioned it before, that dopamine rush, you reinforced it as well. But I see in leadership creation, so if your role stops being technically brilliant and starts becoming about getting stuff done and helping create future leaders, then you need to step away from the hero archetype, the person with the cape on. Whenever there's a problem, you run in, you help fight the fire and fix the problem, and then you get back out again. And then when people get stuck again, you go back in and help again, which gives you these regular dopamine hits. But people don't work out how to solve those problems themselves. They always look for somebody to come and help them at any point in time. And the level of productivity of the team is limited by the resilience of the person being the hero running in and helping people out, because the only way you get more stuff done is when you start to work more hours, do more, get more done, be a hero more often for more different people. And it feels good for a little while, and then you realize that you're tapped out, you can't do it anymore, and you start to crash on the other side. And so I think the mindset shifts that people struggle with is that identity problem. And as you and I have talked to a few times before now, is that hero mindset that gives you the dopamine hit, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of limited failure, because you can't scale the team and organization to get stuff done. You've just got to do more.
Yeah, not everyone can be a hero in those situations, right? And I think sometimes those heroes who consistently do it over time and regular time and time again, it's something that is innate to them because they need to feel valued, or they need to feel like they matter. And sometimes the only way they can do that is by doing more and becoming that hero along the way every time that their skill set is needed, and they jump right in. And it's part of, I think, their nature. And I see that unless it's actively broken, that cycle, with help from the outside, that they're definitely not going to break it most of the time by themselves. And then the other point you mentioned is that if they do go in and just want to put in all those hours just to get the job done, et cetera, or they have this identity crisis of maintaining that connection to the technical and wearing that engineer badge bigger than their leadership badge. Um, in my mind, those people never really wanted the leadership role to begin with. And so they're not actively trying to
Yeah.
pursue it and grow into a leader. And so it's really difficult if you don't innately want something or even want to give it a fair shot in order to grow as a leader. It's very likely not going to happen. So I always look at those signs as indicators that maybe they're in the wrong role, and maybe it's an opportunity to transition them back to a different role, given the effort and the style at which they approach the current role they're in.
Yeah. All right, Tim, maybe someone, maybe not, they're not in your team, but they've seen the work that you're doing and they approach you, Tim, and go, look, Tim, I think I'm ready to make the transition to leadership. What are the first couple of points that you offer to them to help them make that transition? What's the mindsets or the first steps you think that they should take to help them be ready? Or maybe they've just been promoted and they don't know exactly how they're meant to be showing up. What advice would you offer to them?
Yeah, I think number one, I would ask if they hadn't been promoted, or maybe they just were, I would say, why did you want this role to begin with, right? Number one, do you really know why you want to be a leader? Is it for the title? Is it for the money? Is it for you want to be in charge? Or is it really because you want to help people and you want to continue to grow your skill set and be more of an effective asset and well-rounded person, right? And whatever the answer is, there's no wrong answer. But that will really help you navigate the direction in which you help people. Every time I have a mentoring conversation with somebody, I have a mentoring curriculum that I've developed over the last decade, and we go through very hardcore, rigorous 9 month, 10, 12 month work that we do. And the first 2 or 3 months is always about self-reflection. And so I'm a huge proponent of understanding why you want this, go back to the details of all those things. And so we always talk about the why. And so that's number one, a really big important part. And then you also start thinking, okay, where do you stand today in terms of the skill sets that you currently have? And what skill sets do you need to be effective in this current role? And so then we can start looking at the gap analysis to see where you need to focus your efforts, because like all of us, we're strong in some areas and we have opportunities in others. And so just because you got the job doesn't mean you should solely focus on your strengths. Maybe you can focus on your opportunities to continue to grow in that area. So all those types of things we talk about, but also I think the nuances are, I talk a lot about influence now as a big part of your life, and you're going to have to do things and approach things very differently and not force people to bow down to the decisions that you're making. It has to be a collaborative discussion with other people to say, hey, I want to hear what you have to say. I get to make the ultimate decision, but I need to hear all the inputs from everyone else in order for this to be an effective partnership. So those are some of the things that I actually initially talked to them about when it comes to taking on that initial leadership role.
Fantastic. One of the more successful blog posts that I wrote in that series of blog posts, Tim, it's got the most views and reads and whatever,
Nice.
how you measure those metrics, was what are the first 3 things you should do when you're promoted to leadership?
Nice.
And the 3 topics that I cover in there, Tim, is the first one is don't just write a to-do list, write a to-stop list. So what are the things you need to stop doing because you're no longer the person best suited to do it? And I think that's part of this hero mindset transition, Tim, is you first got to realize that the things that you were doing that helped you get promoted are not the things you need to be doing now. So you need to write a to-stop list of the things that are holding you back. And sometimes you need to talk to a mentor to help understand what those are. The second one is a little bit around that principle of not trying to tell everybody what to do, but instead invite them to come up with the solutions. And so I call the second step, forget everything you know, because your job now is to ask more questions than give more answers. And so if you go in with a mindset where you pretend that, at least in your own mind, that you know nothing about what's going on, and your job is to ask questions to find out what other people know about what's going on, you can start to pivot from a telling person to an asking person, and you can start to increase the leadership potential of the people around you because of that. And then the third one, I think, Tim, which is sometimes where it's a little bit more, what's the right word? I can't think of the right word, but is to try and reflect the praise that you receive onto your team instead of absorbing it. When you're an individual contributor, praise is given to you for your contribution. That's easy for you to internalize because that praise is directly linked to the value that you've produced. Now your job is to help other people produce value. So any praise that's given to you, it's your job to try and find the right person within your team or across the whole team to give that, reflect that value back to. And so that was the first 3 steps that I spoke to. And that's often when I talk to people that have just made that transition, I try and reinforce those elements to them. And the key, I guess, mantra, Tim, that I'd offer to them is that it's their job to be right at the end of the meeting, not at the start. So if you have that mentality, you are not the one that is talking first. You are not the one that has formed an opinion and is being tried to be convinced out of it, because that limits the types of conversations you have with your team. Your role is to try and be right at the end of the meeting and not the start. And if that's the mindset you go in with, you start to invite more conversation, more ideation from the group. You start to work out what might work and what might not work, and such that by the time you get to the end of it, everybody has been involved and you've influenced them through their own participation in forming the direction you're trying to move forward as a team.
That's amazing. I love those 3. I love the stop list, actually. I think the challenge for most people, I feel, is recognizing what should be on that stop list. I think that's hard for people. And so that's going to come with a lot of self-reflection and mentorship guidance and so forth about, hey, here's what you need to stop doing. And or you have your spark, or you've got the flip the switch situation like you and I both had, and say, okay, I have to stop doing these things. And eventually those will happen. And hopefully it's one of the biggest pieces on that stop list that you come to that own personal realization. But you have to be able to absorb and listen from other people to help you fill out what that list is going to be. Because I don't think we're all capable, at least in the beginning, to recognize what should be on that list initially. So being open, I think, is critical there. I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and I actually asked him a question similar to this. And one of the things that he said is, you have to also get good at the stuff that you don't like to do. And so as you transition, because a lot of times you can't just, now that you're the leader, you can't just delegate the work to someone else effectively. You have to be able to do your work, but you have to do it faster. You have to do it more efficiently, so you can focus on all the new things you have to do. If you want to hold on to something, that's perfectly fine, but get really good at it so you can do it effectively and very quickly relative to the new stuff that's going to be challenging and require more of your effort along the way.
Yeah. And I think the key thing to remember, Tim, is that you hinted at this before, right? The technical work is often known or discoverable. Like there's a path forward. You've got there's well-defined execution strategies where you get information, you assess options, you test those options, and you propose and move forward. And that structure works pretty much in every technical role that you'll ever take across the organization. But people are going to people, and you're, as a leader now, you're no longer just interested in the technical solution. You've got to manage a whole group of people, and people are unique. They're different. They've got far more going on in their life than just their email signature block professional tag. They're actual humans inside of a working organization, and a leader needs to take on a role that helps facilitate both the achievement of outcomes, but the growth of the humans that you're interacting with as well. So it's a really fundamental key mindset shift. I think it's really important, Tim, and you're 100% right. Sometimes the technical people don't like doing the people talk stuff.
That's right. They don't always do that.
They don't always do that, right? But your role is one of that. And so you must embrace the suckiness elements that you might not like, because that's the reason you're in the role and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think what times people do forget, though, in that is that even in the technical role, there's probably plenty of things that they don't like. Certain meetings they have to go to, grinding through requirements or verification or testing, whatever it is. But even in leadership, you're going to have the same thing. No matter what job you have, there's going to be things that you don't appreciate and you don't
Yeah.
want to do or you don't enjoy doing. But it's just a matter of picking which side of the fence you want to be on and which one is least impactful or least irritating to you in those functions. But every role is going to have those challenging moments where you were just disillusioned and you just want to kind of step away.
Great. Tim, as we wrap up today, I'd love to get perhaps two things from you, Tim. The first is, if you were dialing into this meeting and you only listened to this last second that Tim's speaking right now, what would be the key takeaway you'd hope people would take away? And then the second element is perhaps what would be your most valuable takeaway from this conversation?
Sure. I think the first thing that I would leave people with, and it's somewhat blended in some of the discussion we've had, and I can elaborate, but you don't need a title to make an impact. Just because you're a manager or just because you're a program manager, project manager, doesn't mean you will have all the influence. It doesn't mean you will be respected. It doesn't mean that you will be the person that everyone loves and cares for and really wants to work for. Um, that impact doesn't come from just having the title alone. It's all about the development of influence over the course of time and building out strong relationships with people along the way. So if you focus solely on that, regardless of what role you're in, you will eventually have significant influence across the organization, and that's going to make you much more effective as a leader, regardless of your title or the role in the hierarchy that you fit in the org chart. And I think the key takeaway from today's conversation, Leon, is I love the idea that you brought up towards the end about building out this idea of the stop list. I really I hadn't quite thought about it like that before, but I do think that it's a fascinating concept and something that I'm going to look at to try to leverage things that I currently need to do in order for myself to get to the next level. Or hey, if I'm going to transition to a new role, what do I need to stop doing from this role and start doing more effectively in the next role? And I think something that I haven't done, that I've kind of let it become organic, but
Yeah.
doing some more homework and thought reflection beforehand, I think will be extremely valuable.
Fantastic, Tim. Yeah, for me, I think if I was to leave the audience with a key takeaway, Tim, it would be a little bit around. I'm going to explore the topic you opened up on around influence. Leadership is influence, and then what I think people get confused about is how to influence people, right? Because if influence was the only measure of leadership, bank robbers would be considered leaders, right? They have a massive amount of influence on how people act and interact because they're holding up a bank and people's lives are at risk, right? We don't consider them leaders for good reason, right? But we should work out how we can be most effective at influencing outcomes. And I personally believe one of the things that technical, excellent people under index on is communication skills. And when you think about the ability to influence, you do need to get information from all of the people in the audience and in the team, and work out the right path forward. And if your technical level is at a level 7 and your communication skills are at a level 3, people are going to assess your ability at level 3, not level 7. And so you need to be able to act, effectively communicate and effectively, verbally and in a written way. So my key takeaway, I hope people understand, is if you are interested in moving towards a leadership position, you need to spend more time getting better at communicating what you're trying to achieve, why you're trying to achieve it, even if it's just being able to articulate the problem you're trying to solve effectively. My most valuable takeaway, Tim, is that we've been trying to set this up for a while, right? We've been trying to get together and have this chat. We were like, what topic do we talk about at the start? We've had this fantastic chat now about you're technically brilliant and you're now being promoted. What needs to happen? What goes through your mind? Where have we failed at it before? And I look forward to future chats, Tim, where we get to explore other topics of interest. Thanks for joining us, Iram. I love that you joined it. I'm glad you've taken away the 2 stop lists. I look forward to hosting another one of these, Tim. We're going to work hard on coming up with another intriguing topic to dive into, and I can't wait until we chat again. Thanks very
Absolutely,
much
sir.
for joining us, everyone. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you. I look forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leon. Appreciate you. And thanks to everyone who joined.